Christmas Eve. My grandmother would have been proud of me. I wore a sweater dress over thick woolly tights, and I put on makeup. She didn't know I'd made the extra effort, of course, because when she'd called me up to inquire after the success of my blind date with James Radcliffe, I had played it cool and pretended there wasn't even a second date to make an effort for. I apparently hadn't played it cool enough that Hermione didn't suspect something, however. "I told you I had a good feeling about this one," she said. "This really is the one." Her usual line when I tell her about my disastrous blind dates is, "I'm sure the next one will be better." The next date has never been any better, at least not until she accidentally fixed me up with Jimmy. "When are you seeing James again?" my grandmother asked. "This evening." "I'm not sure," I said. Not sure if we were meeting at 6 or at 7. Hermione mumbled something in Korean about the bottom of the lamp always being dark, which I don't think she meant for me to understand. She has limited faith in my Korean skills. The bottom of the lamp being dark is one of those old expressions which means being blind to what everyone else can see. "You're not sure," my grandmother said in the same voice she would have used if I'd announced I was getting my nose pierced. "I'll get Mrs. Young too." "I'm seeing James this evening," I finally admitted. "On Christmas Eve?" I expected Hermione to chastise me for skipping out on the Christmas Eve children's church nativity pageant. Months ago, I'd agreed to help attach cardboard wings to baby angels and fasten tinsel halos on their heads, but it seemed my grandmother had miraculously forgotten all about me shirking my obligation. "On Christmas Eve." "How romantic," said my grandmother. "Where are you going?" She sounded sincere, and for the first time, I wondered if my grandmother's obsession with pairing me off might have as much to do with her own loneliness since my grandfather had died as it did with her apparent conviction that I was an incomplete person without a life partner. James didn't say where he was taking me. "James picked me up at 7. "Where are we going?" I asked him when he arrived at my door. "We're having a do-over." "Do-over?" "I want to go back in time." "Nobody can go back in time," I pointed out. "It's scientifically impossible. We're going to do the next best thing." "Which is?" "We're going to walk around Candy Cane Lane." Candy Cane Lane isn't a real place, but it's what the locals call the neighborhood around Ravenna Park. Everyone goes all out with lights and decorations. It's beautiful in a festively garish sort of way. It's also where Jimmy broke it to me all those years ago that he was moving to Texas with his mother and leaving me behind. "Listen," I said. "If this is about me getting closure or something, don't bother. I'm fine." "Did it ever occur to you that I might need closure?" "Do you?" "Not really." "Then why bring it up?" "Maybe I'm not looking for closure. Maybe I'm looking for an opening." "Opening?" He didn't answer me. Instead, he told me I'd better wear a hat and mittens and change into snow boots, because we were going to walk around Candy Cane Lane on foot. That's what we'd done all those years ago. We'd walked around for an hour, and then it had started to snow. I remembered kissing Jimmy in the middle of the street as fluffy white flakes drifted down on us like it was yesterday. But it wasn't yesterday. We were just a couple of kids then. Now we were all grown up. If James wanted to recreate that Christmas Eve, he'd better not assume the kiss was included. Also, right after that magical kiss in the snow was when Jimmy had announced he was moving to Texas. However lovely a memory I had of kissing Jimmy Jordan in the snow, I did not want to reenact that moment with Mr. James Radcliffe. Not much, anyway. We parked half a mile away from Candy Cane Lane and trudged through the snow-covered sidewalks to reach the houses with the light displays. When I started to slide on a patch of ice obscured by a dusting of new-fallen snow, James took my hand and kept it. I didn't ask for it back. "Is it as pretty as you remembered it?" I asked as we stood in front of a row of houses dripping with white lights and accepted the festive good wishes of a huge inflatable Santa Claus with a mechanically assisted arm that waved back and forth. "It's prettier than I remember," James said, but he wasn't looking at the lights. I could feel myself blushing and pulled my hand away. You aren't seeing anyone, are you? James asked. What? I felt my face getting even hotter. Why would I go on blind dates if I was? I got the impression from your grandmother that you just go on dates to please her. That was true. Does she know we used to be friends? I asked. Did we used to be friends? We had been friends until we were something more than that. We'd been rather good friends from the time we'd met as freshmen. Does my grandmother know we used to know each other? I amended. James just smiled at me and refused to answer. She knows everything, doesn't she? I persisted. I don't think she knows everything, said James. Hermione was craftier than I'd given her credit for. Never mind, I said. It's a beautiful night. Let's not ruin it by dwelling on the past. I agree, James said, in theory. What do you mean in theory? There's a particular part of the evening I'd like to get a do-over on? You mean the part where you inform me that you're leaving for Texas in 2 days? Not that part, said James. By the way, when are you going back to Texas? I asked the question not so much to get an answer back as to remind myself that James was going back to Texas, and I was staying here. Tonight was an anomaly. It was just a stroll down memory lane, or in this case, candy cane lane. I couldn't let myself like James too much. I really want to kiss you, James said. I wanted to kiss him, too, but I didn't want to deal with the feelings afterward. I don't know if that's a good idea, I said. Why? What if I fall for you again? You're leaving, I said. If I weren't leaving, would that make a difference? I don't know. I think you do know. Yes, I said, I guess it would make a difference. I'm not leaving, said James. What? I had a job interview today. They offered me the position. I thought you had your own business. I do, but I don't have to be in Texas. I have people to run it. Did you take the job? I told them I'd give them an answer after Christmas. Oh. I didn't know what else to say. I know I shouldn't say this, said James, but I still think about you. He didn't say all the time, which was reassuring, somehow. Less stalkerish. The truth was, I thought about him, too. Not all the time, just whenever something reminded me of him, which was more often than it should have been. We're different people now, I pointed out. No, we're the same people, just older. And wiser, hopefully, but I wasn't counting on that. What if I'm not as great as you remember me being? I asked. What if I'm not as great as you remember me being? I was tempted to shoot off some smart remark about there being no need for him to worry himself about that, but I was too distracted by trying not to look at his mouth. I wanted to kiss him. I wanted to kiss James Radcliffe. Despite James' insistence that we were both the same people we'd always been, I disagreed. He wasn't Jimmy Jordan anymore. He was James Radcliffe, and I wanted to kiss him. I wanted to kiss James Radcliffe. I wanted James Radcliffe to stay in Seattle. I wanted to get to know, not the boy he used to be, but the man he was now. A kiss would be nice, I said. What? Said James as if he hadn't heard me clearly. I said, a kiss would be nice. He stood there looking at me like he still hadn't heard right, so I closed the gap between us and kissed him first. His lips were soft and warm. The air around us was crisp and cold. The snow floated down over our heads and settled on us. I reached up and grasped the lapels of his coat, pulling him closer. The song blaring from the speakers outside in the street had switched to it starting to look a lot like Christmas. When I finally broke the kiss, I was surer than ever I wanted James to stay. There's something you should probably know, James said. What's that? It's not going to please your grandmother. Was James still married to someone else, and the divorce wasn't quite yet final? Was he about to confess to being a serial arsonist or to having an extensive criminal record? My imagination went wild. I have a tattoo, James said, and I'm sure you know how grandmothers feel about tattoos. It was a gross generalization and probably unjust to grandmothers as a group, but I had a feeling he was referring to the grandmothers from the Wedgwood Korean Baptist social circle. He was right. Those grandmothers' views on tattoos were unanimous. They didn't approve of them. Is your tattoo anywhere my grandmother is likely to see it? No. That's all right, then. What Halmione doesn't know won't hurt her, I said before I kissed him again. The end.